Okay, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we want to talk about the Vivo V21e. I've been using this phone for a couple of months and I know that's a really long time before making a review, but I kind of really enjoyed using this phone and there are some things about this phone that I didn't really like, and in this video we're going to talk about it. The God of Gods! So first things first, the unboxing experience for this phone. It comes in this really nice looking box that has some Euro 2020 branding on it. I'm not sure why, but the box is really high quality and it looks nice. When you open up the box, you're going to be greeted with the phone, which looks great, especially because of the weird diamondish, purplish back panel that it has. It looks like a really expensive phone, and depending on what your budget is, this is probably a really expensive phone. Moving away from that, you're going to get a TPU case. It's a plastic transparent TPU case that you can use to protect your phone against drops and things like that. And of course, the phone already has a screen protector installed on it. Aside that, you're going to get a 33-watt fast charger in the box. You're going to get the USB-C cable, and you're going to get some headphones, some wired headphones, because this phone also actually still has the headphone jack. Moving away from the unboxing, let's actually talk about the design and build quality of this phone. When you first hold on to this phone, you can tell that it's really light. I mean, it feels premium, but it's also not heavy, which is kind of nice. And I like the design of the back panel, the purplish thing that constantly changes color depending on how you tilt to the back of the phone looks really nice. It's also a glass back, right? So that's really going to be great for wireless charging, I would think, except this phone doesn't actually wirelessly charge, which was a huge disappointment for me. I also like the camera bump on this phone. It's kind of unique and it looks good, and it also matches the design language of the back of the phone. So everything actually works out really nice in the design department. Moving away from that, build quality wise, the phone is actually pretty well built. I mean, if you probably flex it a lot, you probably break it, but for the most part, you're probably not flexing your phone. So it's a really decent looking, decent feeling phone with the bezels around being all metal and stuff. It looks nice. On the left, you're going to get a triple SIM tray, which is basically going to be able to hold 2 SIM cards at the same time and an SD card if you want to expand the memory for this phone. Although the phone already comes with 120 gigabytes of ROM, so you have a lot of storage, but if you need more, you can actually just very easily expand that. On the right side, you get the volume rockers and the power button. On the bottom of the device, you're going to get the headphone jack off to the left. You're going to get the microphone, the USB-C port, and you're going to get the loudspeaker. And speaking of the loudspeaker, this phone only shoots audio from the bottom when you're listening to music or stuff like that. The top is only reserved as your earpiece when you're making phone calls and things like that. I suppose that about rounds it up for the build quality and design of this phone. Now let's actually talk about the screen of the phone. This is a 6.44-inch screen coming in at 1080p by 2400, which is like full HD plus. And honestly, the screen is actually gorgeous. It's one of the first things that you notice with this phone after the on-screen fingerprint sensor, which actually works like a charm. It looks fantastic, it performs well. I like the aspect ratio, I think. I like it for consuming content, Netflix, YouTube videos, things like that. It works out and I have no problems with the screen at all. Speaking about the performance of this phone, like I said before, you have 120 gigabytes of ROM for storage, so you can store as much stuff as you want. And you also have expandable storage, so you can use a TF card. But for the performance, you get 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is actually really impressive, especially when you consider the fact that this phone actually also keeps around 3 gigabytes of RAM of your ROM to use as your RAM if you actually run out of usable RAM space. I'm not sure how they did that, but that's a thing. So you can go all the way up to 11 gigabytes of RAM for more heavy users, people who like to game on their phones and stuff. I don't even bother installing games on my phone. I just use them for basic tasks, phone calls, text messages, emails, texting apps, social media, things like that. Snapchat is probably the most tasking app that I install on my phone, but it's actually usually very telling of the performance of a phone. Now for this phone, it's got the Adreno 618 GPU and it's got the Snapdragon 720G, which is supposed to be a mid-range to almost high-end chipset. It works out really fine. For most basic tasks, the phone does not hang up, it doesn't have any issues. If you're going to be playing very basic games like your chess, like your Word, like your Block Doku, things like that, you're not going to have any problems with this phone. But what I noticed is that the phone kind of tends to slow down sometimes, even though it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which I'm obviously not using, and an extra 3 gigabytes, I'm not sure how that works out. There are situations where I try to use the Snapchat camera, for example, and I'm trying to zoom in and it's very jerky. That happens a lot. And there's other situations where I just feel like my phone is bogged down. Like I'm not doing anything major. Maybe it's just a memory thing with the number of apps that are open, but sometimes it does feel like the phone slows down just a bit. Performance-wise, that's not supposed to be happening, especially for a phone that has ultra gaming mode and 11 gigabytes of RAM, but it does happen, and that's pretty much my experience with this phone. Now, speaking about the cameras, this is probably the part where this phone surprises me the most. Like, I was really surprised at the quality of these cameras, and first I think I should read you the specs of these cameras. So you have a 64 megapixel f1.9 26mm wide main shooter, you have an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide shooter, and you have a 2 megapixel f2.4 macro shooter, which you probably will never use, but it's there in case you need it. On the selfie side of things, you have a 44 megapixel f2.0 autofocus HDR camera. Now for videos, you can shoot up to 4K 30 frames per second on both shooters, and you can shoot 1080p up to 60 frames per second on the back shooter and only 30 frames per second on the front. You have electronic image stabilization on the back, not the actual image stabilization, which is expected for a phone at this price point, and it actually works out pretty fine. But the part where this phone really surprised me is the quality of the photos it can take, especially in night mode. I usually am almost always in the dark in my office, in my living room. Even when I go out, it's almost always nighttime. And for the cameras, I think it performs really decently. I'm going to be showing you some example photos and videos on the screen right now so that you can see what I mean by the impeccable performance of these cameras. The only Android phone that I've used that feels like it has a better camera than my iPhones is usually a Pixel. Whether it be the 3XL, the 4, the Pixel 2 XL, it's usually just a Pixel that has a better camera than my iPhone. But in this case, the Vivo V21e actually comes really close. I'm not going to call it better than my iPhones, but it actually goes neck to neck in certain situations, especially night mode, and it performs fantastic. Now, speaking about the speaker for this phone and basically the entire bottom row for this phone, it's a surprise that the phone actually still has the headphone jack, right? I like the fact that I can pop in my Sennheiser HD 280 Pros and listen to Kanye West's new album because, well, that's the only headphones I have or something. I also like the fact that this option is there. So if you don't have Bluetooth headphones or your Bluetooth dies or something, you can just pop in the wires into your headphones and pop them in here and still listen. This is a dying breed, and phones that actually still have this are surprisingly very important and useful. This is one of the reasons why I still stick to the older Samsung Note series, because they still have the headphone jack. Now, moving on to the speakers on this phone, I don't think they are that great. I mean, they work out decently and they sound fine, but I have used a lot of phones that have significantly better speakers, right? These speakers sound great, they're loud enough, they're going to project the audio, but the fact that it's just one bottom firing speaker is obviously always going to be a problem for media consumption, and you're probably just going to end up popping in some earbuds or using some headphones if you want to have the best experience. But it works out fine, and it's honestly not that bad. As for the charging, I pointed out the fact that this phone has 33 watts fast charging capabilities. Now, the problem with that fast charging though is it's not compatible with everything else. For example, I have a charging dock station in my house where I charge pretty much all my phones, my iPad, everything that I own. And it's like this charger thing that I bought from another brand a while ago that can put out up to 90 watts of fast charging for pretty much any device. I can charge my MacBook with it. But when I actually plug this phone into that charger, it doesn't recognize it as a fast charge source or whatever. It just charges it at regular speed. But if I use the charger that came in the box, the actual charge brick that Vivo included in the box, it charges faster. Now, I don't understand the technology behind this and why that's the case, but if you want that 33 watt fast charging and you want to use that to the best of your abilities or whatever, you're going to have to use the charger that came in the box. And with that 33 watt fast charging, you're actually able to get like 50% charge in like 15 minutes or something ridiculous like that, which is actually fine if you're trying to destroy your battery life over time. Personally, I don't care much for fast charging. I just plug in my phone and let it charge as long as it takes to charge in a healthy and safe environment so that my battery does not degrade over time. So this phone has a 4000 milliamps per hour battery that pretty much lasts me most of the day in many situations where I use this phone, and I usually never have to charge until the next morning. In fact, in some cases, I don't charge until midday the next day, probably because I don't use my phone for any heavy tasks, and I tend to not play video games. I just reply messages, take phone calls, text, and do social media with my phone. So finally, to the closing for this video, what's my user experience been like for this phone? Now, like I said, I use this phone exclusively as my only phone, as my main device for about 2 months. And all I can say is my experience was fine. I'll probably rate this a solid 7.5 over 10 for an experience for the first time using a phone from a brand like Vivo. I have never bought a phone from them before, and my experience was honestly not bad. I used the phone, I enjoyed it, it was fine. The cameras were great, the speakers were okay. Performance-wise, the phone was fast enough for all my daily tasks. It barely gave me any issues. Design and build quality is fine. Most of the time, you catch me not using it with the case because I just like how beautiful it is. But I know at the back of my mind that if I drop this phone, I'll probably completely break it because glass is glass and glass would break. My only disappointment with this phone is it has a glass back that looks this gorgeous, and they forgot to include wireless charging. Or maybe they didn't forget, they just chose to leave it out completely. But wireless charging would have been a great addition because I don't see the point of making a phone that's this gorgeous with a glass back, right? Plastic would have been more durable. You make it glass and then you don't include wireless charging. Why do that? Anyways, that was pretty much my review of the Vivo V21e. I think it's a fantastic phone. If you find this at a really, really decent price, it's probably fine for around or just under $300, but anything more than that, I'd say wait for this to be on sale or just completely buy an older flagship instead of buying this phone. It's a great phone, but it wouldn't be my first choice at that price point. Anyways, that was pretty much my review of the Vivo V21e. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I will see you on another video that was shot by Kagan. Peace.